So today is a challenge day. I have decided that I'm going to take this and try and make a serviceable guitar tone out of it. Now, the thing about this amp is that it is rubbish, and I mean terrible. It's been sat in my drawer for around about 6 years since I bought it, and I don't really know why I bought it, but I did. So today we're going to take a look at taking something like this and making it sound good, or at least serviceable, in a mix. So one of the first things that I need to do to work out how I'm going to use this little amp in a professional mix is start to familiarise myself with it. So what better a way than to just kind of sit and fiddle. One thing I've noticed straight off the bat is the lighter you play and the less gain there is, the better it sounds. So well, that's going to sound much nicer than... So actually I'm fairly surprised at this point. So if I start pumping the gain, you'll hear that the gain has a fairly horrible breakup. It's just a bit muddy, especially when you go down low. So we don't really want too much gain, so I'm keeping that rolled off. Volume is a little bit of a sweet spot as well. Now, if you don't know too much about using an amp, or if you're fairly new to amps, don't disregard the volume as part of your tone. It's not necessarily just how loud the amp is. A lot of the time, there's a sweet spot, and that sweet spot will have your amp working at perfect capacity. I think I'm around about there with this. So if I turn it all the way up, it's just very You can hear there's a lot of gain being added, and we don't want that. So if I roll it back too much, it's going to start sounding too thin. In fact, you're probably hearing more of my guitar than the actual amp there. So I would say around about here is around about the sweet spot. I really want to avoid that throaty kind of sound as well. Okay. The other thing that I've done, because I'm fairly confident that when I go for the heavy tones, it's going to sound like a fart. In fact, I'm willing to bet that this is going to sound like a fart. It sounds like a fart. So, again, the volume over the gain, I think, is probably going to be better, just because I'm not having this really janky gain structure put in, because it's not really made for metal, is it? Straight off the bat, that's not awful. I mean, it is, but for like 30 quid, it's not. What I wanted to do was test this precision drive with the amp and see if adding £150 worth more equipment will change it. Okay, not too bad. That's actually not too bad. What I'm finding is that it's got a lot of high end, so I can EQ that out, but the body's there, and there's a little bit of low end, not much, but just enough that I can really kind of emphasize when I'm mixing it. Yeah, that's really cool, actually. If I crank the gain, I imagine it's going to become a little bit too harsh. No. That definitely needs to stay down. And I'd say maybe the volume, if I keep it in that, what I thought was around about the sweet spot. Maybe for the djentiness, it does need to crank on the volume. That's not so bad. What I think is actually I've got a few sets now of sound that I think I can turn into a composition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a clean tone, a heavy tone, and a lead tone. And that lead tone, I think, is going to have to be somewhere around that clean kind of crunch region. I don't think I'll use the precision drive for it. And if I use like the middle position... So that's what I've managed to get out of around about 5 or 6 hours work with this little amp. And the point of this exercise is it's more about the ear than the gear. Because if I can get a serviceable tone out of this tiny little amp in a few hours, then with your dual super lead or your line 6 spider or whatever, you can actually do something cool with it. You just need the tools to go along with it. Because those same tools you will need if you're going through a Mesa Mark V. You'll need those same tools anyway. So in your journey towards becoming a great songwriter or producer, it's worth getting these tools under your belt because they're the ones that are the trick to sounding good. To create this guitar tone, I only had 3 plugins present. The FabFilter Pro Q, which was essentially the same as any inbuilt DAW EQ you can get. It's just got a slightly nicer flavour to it. I had a dip just above the 2K mark and another one around about the 4K mark, and then I had a boost on the high end around about 10K. And the idea here was to get rid of any harsh and ugly frequencies in the high end of the tone, but I really wanted to get that glittery, sparkly sound right at the top. The second one was another EQ. This one came free with my Scarlett 2i2 from Focusrite. This EQ wasn't really doing much at all. All it really did was a high pass filter at 36, and on the high mids around about the 4.5K, it had a 3 decibel drop. Finally, a low pass filter at 16K, and this just kind of again gets rid of those mucky frequencies that your ears don't really want. Finally, the Steve & Slate digital compressor. Now you can get similar results with any compressor really, but again I really like the flavour of this compressor. And again, there's barely any processing going on. The threshold is set very low because there's not a lot of dynamic information coming through the amp. The sound is very compressed as it is. And the ratio is at 4, which sounds like a lot, but what it's really doing is just bringing out a little bit of the punch in each note. The attack is set at its slowest. Again, that will bring out a load of punch in the note because the compressor will kick in just after the transient of the note and the release is fast, which means if I were to have played a quick passage, those notes will just glimmer a little bit. And that's essentially it. So if you've been here for a while, or you've been through the videos on my channel, you'll notice that there's been a lot of original music here. This is because I've been working towards this. I'll be releasing Introvert Extrovert, my first solo album soon, and I'd love you to be a part of the journey. I'll be releasing updates and songs here on YouTube, so if you like what you hear, just hit subscribe and hear it all first.